Is Mr. Torres? Oh, good morning, Mr. Torres.
No duct tape. Stand your ground. No retreat.
Sir,
Make my bond and chill you.
I'm going to ask that you be quiet.
I'm just making a request. You make it $1 million, I'm paying that, and I'm getting out.
Thank you. Mr. Torres.
Thank you, Your Honor. My understanding is that he is demanding, so the date will be November 7th.
November
Now,
7th?
The state will ask for a $5 million bond in this case. Not
Make
only
that
because
shit
of
$5
the
billion.
defendant's- the
$5
defendant's
billion.
statements in the court
That's disrespectful.
in regards to the bond and the threats to the prosecutor.
I made promises.
Those promises were also made in previous cases. The defendant was served 3 years for 2 cases, intimidation, attempted intimidation, and menacing by stalking. The menacing by stalking, for which he finished serving his sentence last June.
It was the kind of call no one ever wants to respond to. Early in the morning on October 23rd, 2019, Cleveland police arrived at East 109th Street and Mount Carmel Road. What they found would haunt them for days to come. Lying on the cold pavement was the body of a 26-year-old woman. Willnita Hill, Wita, as she was known, had been shot multiple times. There was no mistaking it. Her life was gone in an instant, leaving a pool of blood that would soon tell a tragic story. As officers circled the scene, trying to piece together what had happened, one name kept coming up: Antonio Swanson, the victim's half-brother. But why? What had led to this moment of violence? No one had the answers yet. All they knew was that Wita's death was not an accident, and Antonio, though nowhere to be found, was quickly becoming the focus of their investigation. At that moment, as the sun began to rise over the quiet street, the search for answers had just begun. Wita Hill's story began in Cleveland, Ohio, a city known for its industrial roots, vibrant art scene, and passionate sports culture. But beneath this city's rich history, there was a dark undercurrent. Cleveland's violent crime rate was 29% higher than the national average, a staggering statistic that would echo in the tragic events that would claim Wita's life. Born on August 13, 1993, Wita was the daughter of Willnita Hill and William Martin, and she grew up in a large, blended family. Her father had 4 children, while her mother had 5, and though the bonds between the siblings were strong, the family structure was anything but simple. Wita's upbringing in a blended family meant she had to navigate more than just the usual struggles of childhood. She was raised in a home with both stability and instability. Her father, William Martin, was a constant presence, and though her half-siblings came from different backgrounds, they shared in the connection of family, even though it was often fractured. Wita grew up with a deep understanding of loyalty and compassion, and she learned early in life that these values were everything. Her resilience was shaped by the fractured dynamics of her childhood, and it stayed with her throughout her life. Her love for her family was fierce and unconditional, but the same family that gave her so much love would eventually bring her unimaginable harm. The tragic events of October 23, 2019, began long before that day, deep in the roots of Wita's family life. Wita's journey wasn't defined by her upbringing alone. She knew what it meant to fight for what she wanted and to work hard for her dreams. After graduating from East Detroit High School in 2011, Wita was ready to take on the world. She was driven and determined, eager to start building a life that would provide for herself and, one day, for the children she hoped to have. Her strength wasn't just seen in the way she approached her goals, but in her ability to face challenges head-on, with a resolve that was evident to everyone around her. With her high school diploma in hand, Wita set out to build a meaningful life. She didn't wait for opportunities to come to her. She made her own. She entered the workforce, taking jobs at Target and Walmart Supercenter, where her work ethic and vibrant personality made an immediate impression on both her coworkers and customers. Whether it was a friendly smile or an extra helping hand, Wita had a unique ability to make people feel valued. Her customers noticed, her coworkers respected her, and her managers relied on her. But even in her daily work routine, no one could predict the significance of her kindness. How that warmth, that energy, would be missed by so many when it was taken away. By the time she had established herself in the workforce, Wita was well on her way to building a life rooted in hope, purpose, and, most importantly, her children. In 2013, She met a man who promised a future together. Like many young romances, theirs started with a spark, a connection full of potential. They made plans, shared laughs, and dreamed of a life together. On November 3rd, 2013, Wita gave birth to their first child, a beautiful baby boy. Although born prematurely at 7.5 months, Wita's strength as a mother was clear from the very start. She poured every ounce of energy into nurturing him, proving early on that her love as a mother was fierce, unconditional, and unshakable. This new chapter in her life ignited a fire in Wita, one that made her even more determined to provide for her child and give him a future filled with love and security. But motherhood was never without its challenges. A few years later, in February 2016, Wita gave birth to a beautiful baby girl. However, soon after, cracks began to form in her relationship with her partner. The man who had once stood by her side began to distance himself, emotionally and physically. He became unavailable, leaving Wita to carry the weight of their family alone. Heartbroken but determined, Wita turned to social media to voice her frustrations. She shared the deep pain of a mother left to shoulder everything by herself, and in post after post, she called out the man who had walked away from his responsibilities. He wasn't just abandoning her, he was abandoning their children. But Wita, never one to be defeated by the absence of love, continued to focus on her kids. She raised them with the same resilience she'd learned growing up. Though the relationship eventually ended, Wita's love for her children remained unwavering. The pain from the breakup didn't deter her. Instead, it deepened her resolve to ensure her kids had a future filled with love, security, and opportunity. Then, in 2017, a glimmer of hope re-entered her life. She met a man who offered her stability, kindness, and shared her vision for family. Finally, after years of hardship, peace returned to Wita's life. Her children felt the difference too. With this new partner, Wita felt for the first time in a long time that she could breathe. This new stability brought joy and a renewed sense of purpose to her life. On June 21st, 2017, Wita gave birth to her third child, a beautiful baby girl. This time, things felt different. She had found a partner who stood by her side and took pride in raising their child together. For the first time in years, Wita shared her happiness on social media, proud of her growing family and the peace that finally seemed to settle over her life. Her children became the heart of her world, the very reason for everything she did. Whether it was raising them, protecting them, or building a future for them, everything Wita did was for them. And if you asked anyone who knew her, they would all say the same thing. Wita was a mother before anything else, and there was nothing she wouldn't do for her kids. But while Wita Hill worked tirelessly to build a stable life for her children, the danger that would eventually shatter it was already growing within her own family. It wasn't immediately apparent to those who didn't know her well, but Antonio Swanson, Wita's half-brother, was a constant source of tension within the family. On the surface, Antonio was just another relative, but those who had spent time with him understood the complexity that lay behind his presence. To his family, his very existence seemed to bring chaos rather than comfort. For those who knew him best, Antonio's history was no secret. His reputation had been tarnished for years by a record marked by violence, instability, and crime. His past wasn't just etched in police reports. It was also reflected in the content he shared with the world. Antonio had been in and out of prison, serving time for offenses ranging from theft to domestic violence. But his criminal behavior didn't stop at the physical world. It spilled into his online presence, where he portrayed himself as volatile and intimidating. On social media, he posted videos that were nothing short of alarming. Armed and angry, he made threats without hesitation. In one particularly chilling video, Antonio waves a firearm at the camera, boasting about his willingness to use it. His words were filled with hatred and arrogance, aimed at anyone he believed had disrespected him. "You already know who it is, man. Stay with me. My clip's full, and I've got bullets for anyone talking shit." His words were empty threats to most people, but they foreshadowed something much darker, something no one could have predicted. The day his sister, Wita, would become the victim of that very rage. But not all of Antonio's posts were filled with explosive anger. Some hinted at a deeper pain that he was struggling to manage. In one post, he shared how he had been raised without parents, a sentiment that hinted at the trauma he carried from childhood. In another, he posted a screenshot from Instagram, lamenting how no one seemed to care about him on his birthday. These were the moments that revealed a man battling deep feelings of neglect and abandonment. His social media presence, often a reflection of his anger, also revealed his vulnerability, even if he didn't know how to express it properly. But no matter the backstory, the reality was clear. Antonio's unchecked anger was building to a breaking point, and no one knew how close it was to exploding. Despite all of this, Wita tried to keep the peace. She had always been someone who believed in giving others a second chance, even when they had given her every reason to walk away. To her, Antonio was family. Even with his violent outbursts and erratic behavior, she tried to love him. She held on to hope that he would change, believing that perhaps if she just kept trying, things might get better. Her choice to continue reaching out to him, despite the tension he caused, would come at a devastating cost. Then, on the afternoon of October 13th, 2019, the unthinkable happened. It was a typical day in Wita's life. She had a routine: take care of her children, run errands, handle the usual daily tasks. But it was in the midst of this ordinary day that she made a choice that would change everything. Without thinking much of it, she took the keys to Antonio's silver Pontiac Grand Prix and handed them to her boyfriend, asking him to drive. It wasn't a major act in itself, just a small decision to make life a little easier, to get from one place to the next. But to Antonio, it was a violation, a betrayal that ignited an explosive rage within him. When Wita and her boyfriend returned to East 109th Street and Mount Carmel Road, they had no idea what was waiting for them. As they pulled up, they were met with Antonio's fury. The argument began immediately. It wasn't long before the words exchanged escalated into something far more violent. In the heat of the moment, Antonio, already enraged, pulled out a gun. The small confrontation turned deadly in an instant. He shot at Wita, and she collapsed to the ground, unable to move. But Antonio's rage didn't stop there. Instead of walking away, he approached Wita as she lay on the pavement. With no hesitation, he shot her again twice. 2 more shots, fired point-blank into her body. No remorse. No second thoughts. It was an act of cold brutality right there in the street. A place that should have been safe for Wita, but became the setting of her tragic end. She was killed by her own brother, in broad daylight, with no one able to stop him. The violence didn't stop with Wita's death. Almost immediately after, gunfire erupted again. This time, it was Antonio and Wita's boyfriend. Bullets flew in every direction as the chaos unfolded, and the already shattered moment was made even worse. Antonio, seeing his brother-in-law survive, decided to flee. With no time to waste, he grabbed a bicycle and disappeared, riding away from the scene like a man who knew exactly what he'd done and who didn't care. As Antonio disappeared into the night, neighbors, horrified by the spectacle they had just witnessed, quickly dialed 911. Panic spread through the area. The violence was too much, and people feared it might escalate further. But by the time Cleveland police arrived, it was too late. Wita Hill was already dead, and her killer was nowhere to be found. What followed was a long period of silence, a silence filled with grief and disbelief. Wita's family was shattered, forced to confront the reality of a senseless and cold-blooded act. Her death left a hole in the hearts of everyone who knew her, and in the family that was supposed to protect her. But, as the community tried to process the shock, the story began to make headlines across Cleveland. The murder of a young mother, taken by her own brother, was a tragedy too painful to ignore. Within hours, the manhunt for Antonio Swanson began. The Northern Ohio Violent Fugitive Task Force, working with the Cleveland Division of Police, launched an operation to track down Antonio. Authorities issued warnings about his appearance, noting that he had a distinct limp and should be considered armed and dangerous. They believed he was hiding somewhere in the Buckeye Shaker area, and the public was urged to report any sightings. Then, just 5 days after the brutal murder of his sister, Antonio's escape ended. On October 28, 2019, he was found hiding in a home on Crestwood Avenue, near East 110th Street in Cleveland. He was arrested without incident, taken into custody, and brought back to face the consequences of his actions. But this was just the beginning of a long, painful journey for his family, for justice, and for the community. What would follow was a tedious legal battle that would reveal shocking truths about the man responsible for Wita's death. He found himself standing before a judge in the Cleveland Municipal Court, facing the gravity of his actions, but Antonio's appearance in that courtroom did nothing to bring clarity or remorse. If anything, it only deepened the horror of the crime he had committed. As he stood there, the weight of the murder hanging over him, it became immediately clear that the man in front of the judge was not the one who had killed his sister out of some momentary lapse in judgment. No, this was a man detached from the reality of what he had done, a man who, despite the tragic consequences of his actions, seemed to have no understanding of the damage he'd caused. From the moment the hearing began, Antonio's behavior was nothing short of disturbing. His hands were visibly shaking, but his face was locked in a blank, defiant stare, his eyes showing neither regret nor fear. He seemed completely lost in his own world, far removed from the solemnity of the situation. The courtroom, filled with those who had come to witness justice, was not prepared for the arrogance that would soon follow. As Antonio Swanson stood in front of the judge, he made it clear that he had no intention of entering a standard plea. Instead, he insisted that he would plead not guilty by reason of insanity. Not just that, as the prosecutor began speaking, calmly requesting that a bond of $5 million be set, it was clear that Antonio was not listening, at least not in the way he should have. He interrupted the prosecutor, not with words of remorse, but with mockery, openly mocking the seriousness of the bond request. As the bond hearing continued, the judge raised Antonio Swanson's bond from $5 million to $15 million. His final statements during the hearing weren't just unsettling. They served as a grim indication of the erratic, unpredictable behavior that would become more apparent throughout the court proceedings. On November 8, 2019, a Cuyahoga County grand jury formally indicted Antonio Swanson, adding more serious charges, including multiple counts of aggravated murder, attempted murder, felonious assault, and weapons offenses. But just as the legal proceedings were unfolding, another shocking revelation came to light. It turned out that Antonio's violent rampage didn't stop with the murder of Wita Hill. After fleeing the crime scene, his spree escalated when he tried to kill both his father and another civilian, marking an even more horrifying escalation of violence. 10 days after, on November 18, 2019, Antonio Swanson appeared before the court. But despite the chilling details of the case, his violent history, erratic behavior, and the brutality of the crime, his bond was inexplicably reduced to $2 million. The decision sparked public outrage, with many questioning the court's judgment, especially given Antonio's long track record of violence and the alarming signs of his mental instability. His behavior in the courtroom had already raised serious concerns about his potential danger to others, and this ruling only added fuel to the fire. The case that should have progressed swiftly was now stalled, weighed down by a series of delays, legal maneuvers, and repeated psychological evaluations. Months stretched into years as both the prosecution and defense prepared for a drawn-out legal battle. Antonio sat behind bars, awaiting a trial that seemed to drag on endlessly, as the case became more complex with each passing month. But then, in September 2021, nearly 2 years after the murder, Antonio made an unexpected decision. He pleaded guilty to the murder of his sister, Wita Hill. This sudden shift in the case, which seemed to come out of nowhere, brought an abrupt end to the long, painful legal process. It left many stunned by the quiet resolution to a case filled with so much chaos, anger, and courtroom outbursts. While the legal battle may have ended, the emotional pain for Wita's family had only begun. Her children, now left without their mother, were the true victims of this senseless tragedy. 3 young lives were left without the warmth, guidance, and love that only a mother could provide. Their foundation, once solid and safe, was now shattered. Family could try to fill the void, but there was no substitute for the love of a mother. No amount of time would ever undo the damage that had been done, and as much as the family tried to heal, the pain remained a constant reminder of what they had lost. The heartbreak that followed Wita's death was impossible to put into words. For those who knew her, it felt as if the world had lost someone truly special. And as the grief echoed through her family, it was a stark reminder of how untreated trauma and unaddressed mental health issues could get out of control, leading to irreversible destruction. As the case closed, one truth remained. Justice may have been served in a legal sense, but the true cost of Wita's murder was something that would never be fully paid. So what do you think about this case? Let us know in the comment section below. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more true crime stories like this.